Choosing a bottled Starbucks Frappuccino drink that's all flavor and just 100 calories? Easy. Choosing between creamy vanilla, double chocolate, and sea salt caramel flavors? A little harder. Try the delicious new Starbucks Frappuccino light drinks. Look for them wherever you buy groceries. Start with Starbucks coffee.
Richard Nixon.
Well, I'm not a crook.
Ronald Reagan.
Tear down this wall.
George W. Bush.
I can hear you. The rest of the world hears you.
And Donald Trump.
And a friend of mine for a long time, he only likes politics. If you ask him about how are the Yankees doing, he has no interest. If you ask him almost anything, he likes politics, and he's a professional at the highest level. Roger Stone.
All of these presidents relied on one man to secure their seat in the Oval Office. That man is Roger Stone. This is the Roger Stone Show on 77 WABC.
Welcome back. I'm Roger Stone, and this is the Roger Stone Show at 77 WABC. We are the crown jewel of talk radio, the most influential and powerful AM radio station in the world. And I am honored to have as my next guest Colonel Douglas McGregor. Colonel McGregor is a decorated combat veteran, author of 5 books. He has a PhD and is recognized as a defense and foreign policy expert and consultant. Colonel McGregor was commissioned in the regular Army in 1976 after 1 year at VMI and 4 years at West Point. He retired with the rank of colonel. In 2020, President Donald Trump appointed McGregor to serve as senior advisor to the Secretary of Defense. He held until the time that President Trump left office. Doug McGregor is a man who knows how to make war. He has a distinguished combat record of leading men in war, but he could be one of the leading advocates for peace in the country today, which is why I'm pleased that he could join us. Colonel McGregor, welcome to the Roger Stone Show.
Oh, thanks for inviting me, Roger.
So we get this constant flow of news that tells us that the Ukrainians have attacked deep inside Russia, continuing to give us the impression that somehow Ukraine is winning this conflict, or that the billions that we have sent there are actually having the desired, at least public relations related effect. Can you tell us what is really going on in the conflict between Russia and Ukraine?
Sure. And I think this incident is important, but not for the reasons that people are hearing on the news. For several months, it sounds like the British and the Americans working with the Ukrainians planned this operation, and they moved across the border with Russia into an area where almost nobody lives. I mean, it's very, very desolate. Lots of forests, rivers, brooks, very different from what people imagine. And ultimately, they moved an estimated 12,500 troops in. And of course, this was an area far from the scene of battle. It was something that the Russians probably anticipated, but didn't bother committing forces to defend it. Which was probably an error, but this is an area the size of Texas, Roger. You've only got 700,000 Russian troops. They can only be in so many places at once. So they managed to penetrate. They got in there. They've now lost about 3,000 dead. There are perhaps 7,000 or 8,000 men left. 2,000 of the troops that went in with the Ukrainians appear to be British and American. Whether they're mercenaries in Ukrainian uniform or not, I don't know, but we have lots of English speakers on the radio. The Russians have now surrounded them, cut them off so they can't escape back into Ukraine. The Russians have lost about 300 killed, maybe 200 or 300 wounded, and they are now systematically annihilating what remains in what we would call a pocket. And it's a pretty gruesome outcome. But this has changed the game for Moscow. And I think what we're going to see now is a tremendous counterstrike that's probably going to go to Kiev.
It is my belief that our ongoing efforts, when I say our, meaning the U.S. government under Antony Blinken and presumably Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, that our push of Ukraine into NATO is a clear violation of the Budapest Memorandum agreed to by Secretary of State James Baker on behalf of the United States, as well as the Minsk Accords. Based on my reading, when East and West Germany were united and the Russians agreed to that, we agreed not to push Ukraine, to use his exact wording, 1 inch closer to Russia. But our actions, our insistence of putting Ukraine into NATO is what this war is all about. Just as John Kennedy did not want Russian missiles 90 miles from our shore pointed at the United States, I don't think Putin or the Russian people want NATO missiles pointed, based in their country, pointed at Russia. Yet the counter narrative is, as you know, that Putin, this is all about his territorial ambitions. And once he takes Ukraine, he's going to take Poland and then Germany and then France, and then he'll own all of Europe. I don't even think this is feasible, never mind true.
Well, of course, it's nonsense. It's a huge lie. All you have to do is go back to February of 2022 when the Russians intervened. They went in with a very small force because they had a very small army. And the objective was to get everybody's attention. They've been trying desperately over the previous 10 to 15 years to make the point that what happened in Ukraine was of vital strategic interest to them. And they certainly did not want Ukraine to be turned into a platform for the projection of hostile military power from NATO into Russia. As you pointed out, if you put the kinds of missiles that we're talking about deploying now again to Germany and perhaps Western Poland into eastern Ukraine, you're within minutes of the Russian nuclear deterrence. You're within minutes of all the major cities, which is where most people live in Russia. So the bottom line is that this is a travesty. We brought this on. Now we're hearing all sorts of different reasons why. I mean, clearly there was always an interest in bringing Russia down so they could strip it of its resources. I mean, that's clear, but at the same time, it's still difficult to fathom the folly involved, how badly we misinterpreted the Russians, how completely false our evaluations were. We have no strategy except to, quote unquote, harm Russia. Russia's growing at 3% plus a year now. Their economy is booming. The economy in Europe is in ruins, and we'll be lucky to grow at all. It's a catastrophe. It never needed to happen. And unfortunately, when Donald Trump was the president, this nonsense continued under his watch. He didn't like it. He wanted to stop it, but he didn't. And it continued. And then, obviously, once he was out of office, it regained tremendous momentum, and now Ukraine is in ruins. The nation is destroyed. The good news is that this is winding down, and I know a lot of Americans don't understand that. But the truth is that the Russians, I think, are going to move very decisively now to strike down this regime. And Zelensky, I'm told, has his bags packed. He's moved all his money into various bank accounts, the billions that he's stolen, along with his inner circle. And I would expect that once the Russians move on Kiev, he'll find an airplane somewhere that he can get into and fly away.
Well, he has a fabulous luxury condominium in Miami Beach that I think was $22 million, I believe. I looked at the real estate records the other day.
Well, he also has a spectacular vineyard, a wine growing plantation, whatever you want to call it, estate in Tuscany with a beautiful villa. He and his wife have purchased that. They have a home in Venice. I'm talking about Italy. You mentioned Miami. I'm sure there are other things in other places. I mean, the fantastic sums of American and European money that have been stolen by him and his comrades, the so-called neo-Nazis, is phenomenal. It dwarfs Karzai in Afghanistan and the crooks in Iraq.
Well, and the more outrageous thing, of course, is they continue to tell us that this is about democracy. I mean, Zelensky has outlawed every party except for his, has arrested all of his political opponents, including those who ran against him in the last election. He closes down newspapers, radio stations, television stations. He arrests journalists. He's outlawed the largest church in the country. So this is most certainly not at all about democracy. And Barack Obama, whose foreign policy Joe Biden and Antony Blinken have merely carried forward and are pushing, seem intent on war. We don't, to my knowledge, even have any negotiations going regarding a ceasefire or cessation of hostilities. And although it appears to me the Ukrainians may be ready for that, it continually gets vetoed by our State Department. What is their larger aim here? Is their aim just the profiteering of world war? What is their purpose?
Well, I think this administration and its foreign and defense policies, as well as internally, everything is a kind of runaway train. They're headed down the side of a mountain at, hypersonic speed. They have no chance of stopping anything. I think they've simply lost control everywhere. We've lost control in the Middle East and are hurtling towards a war there. We've lost control in Europe. I think we're going to see dramatic turnover in Europe and the governments over the next several months. And I think the Europeans are going to say, thank you very much, but no more to Washington. The funny thing is, Roger, and you have experience with this, the people that are consistently droning on about democracy are the ones that show the most contempt for it, right here inside our own country as well as overseas. They don't care what people do as long as the people are doing what they want them to do. And then, of course, they characterize that as somehow or another morally pristine and democratic, but it's a big lie.
Yeah, it's quite extraordinary that the party that's been whining incessantly about democracy and Trump being a threat to democracy is about to nominate a candidate that literally not a single American voter has voted for president. And their convention, under their rules, doesn't even require a vote to nominate their candidate for vice president. They try to keep Trump off the ballot. What could be more anti-democratic than that? They try to censor speech on the internet platform, something both you and I have experienced. I can't imagine what would be more anti-democratic than that. It is really a farce. I want to switch to the Middle East because you brought it up, and it is a powder keg that is abundantly clear. Under Donald Trump, clearly the sanctions he placed on Iran, where they couldn't even sell their oil to the Chinese because the sanctions were so harsh and so strict, they were out of cash. No money to continue their nuclear weapons development program, no money to subsidize Hamas and Hezbollah for the terrorist attacks on Israel. Joe Biden really, again, carrying out the policies of Barack Obama, decides to not only cancel those sanctions, but to unfreeze more than $100 billion in assets for Iran. Before they get the money, the Iranians, of course, say they'll only use it for humanitarian purposes. And after they get the money, they say, well, this is our money. We can do anything we want with it. I don't understand the philosophy here. Why do the Democrats seem to think that empowering and building up Iran will bring greater stability to the region when it's so obvious that that is not the case?
Well, I think we've had problems with sanctions for years. We've gotten to the point where we've bullied so many countries for so long into trying to make them do what we want them to do that I don't think the sanctions make much difference. I think we have roughly 33 or 34 countries under some form of punishing economic sanction. And this is one of the reasons that you see this alternative system emerging. This thing we call the BRICS originally was Britain, India, South Africa, Russia, and so forth. Now it's going to include Saudi Arabia, Iran, Turkey. There are 84 countries waiting to join it. By the time they're through, out of the 132 nation states on the planet Earth. I think all but about 30 or 40 will be members of it. I think our policies have all backfired on us. We have become a pariah state. People are tired of us. And now, unfortunately, our destiny is in the hands of this man, Netanyahu. We've made the very dangerous decision to unconditionally support him and do whatever he wants. And we're being dragged into what arguably looks like a regional war with global implications, because the Russians and the Chinese will not sit still while we pulverize Iran. On the contrary, the Chinese have called the Iranians and made it very clear they will not allow their sovereignty to be destroyed. Because if you close down the Straits of Hormuz, if you destroy the oil terminals in Iran and potentially in Iraq, you're looking at $12 a gallon for gas. And you're looking at the potential crash of our financial system, the disruption of the whole world economy. So this administration has gone beyond anything anybody ever has done in the past in that region, in Europe, and everywhere. They have essentially fomented war and destruction at every turn, and they don't know what else to do, and they're afraid to back out, because if they back out, they'll have to admit what they've done. And that's an impossibility in Washington. You know that, Roger. Nobody ever says, gee, I'm sorry, I made a mistake.
It's clear, though, that public support for the war in Ukraine specifically is wearing thin. I mean, I study an enormous amount of public opinion research every day, polling. I check the samples and the methodology before I spend the rest of my time reading it. But there really is no appetite among the American people to continue to subsidize a war in Ukraine when we have many, many horrific problems in our own country. And just like with the Vietnam War, once the American people began to realize that we were not winning and we were not going to win, and public support for the war collapsed, it was really incumbent on President Richard Nixon to win the war, to end the war. He really had to end the war. He did so on a faster time frame than the Pentagon and the defense contractors wanted, but he still ended the war. The American people here, I think, have hit their saturation point in terms of shipping dollars abroad. Do you also see this collapse among the American people for this continued foreign adventurism?
I think we're close to it, but I think the larger issue for most Americans are the open borders, the rising criminality, inflation. You know, your 30-year mortgage is over 7%. I mean, the country is in free fall, both financially and economically. That's what concerns Americans. They're not watching very carefully what goes on overseas because they think war is something that happens on somebody else's soil. Well, I think if we're fortunate, this thing in Ukraine will wind down, and I think it will. But the war in the Middle East won't. And that war could visit us here inside the United States. Once Americans figure that out, I'm sure it'll be over. But at the moment, there's nothing to restrain anyone from doing anything that is dangerous and stupid. I hate to be blunt, but that's the situation at the moment.
That is, in fact, really sobering. As you know, there's a disproportionate number of single military age men, particularly a large number of Chinese, but also those from the Middle East pouring across our border. Robert F. Kennedy, who's an independent candidate for president, says that he does not think that China is a military threat to our country. I'm not sure he's right about that. If you're just tuning in, folks, we're talking to Colonel Douglas McGregor, widely recognized as an expert on defense and foreign policy with a distinguished record of service to his country. And if you'll stick with us here at 77 WABC and the Roger Stone Show, well, we'll be right back with Colonel McGregor. We will continue to focus on whether this country is indeed hurtling towards war.
Impact confirmed. The Slayer has been activated.
Demonic threat level increasing.
Hold the line!
All the power of hell
before one man.
id Software presents Doom: The Dark Ages. Available May 15th on Xbox Series X and S, PlayStation 5, and PC. Pre-order now.
Rated M for mature.
ChatGPT Plus is free for college students through May. Here's the thing. You've got a lot to do between now and then. Studying for finals, writing papers, trying to keep your life on track. And ChatGPT can help with all of it. It can quiz you for your econ exam, make a study guide from your French notes, plan out your meals and study breaks. It can get really specific on how you like to learn. It can even help you come up with ways to stop procrastinating. So from now until summer break, take advantage of all the ways ChatGPT can make your life easier. Restrictions apply.
This episode is brought to you by Factor. Optimize your nutrition this year with Factor, America's #1 ready-to-eat meal service. Factor's fresh, never frozen meals are dietitian approved, ready to eat in just 2 minutes. Choose from 40 weekly options across 8 dietary preferences like Calorie Smart, Protein Plus, and Keto. Eat smarter at factormeals.com/listen50 and use code listen50 for 50% off plus free shipping on your first box. Factormeals.com/listen50, code listen50. T's and C's apply.
Last week was our first playoff game, and my plaque psoriasis was so itchy under all my gear. Sometimes just thinking about scratching could take me out of the moment. And then my doctor told me I could get clearer skin with a pill called Otezla.
Otezla apremilast is a prescription medicine used to treat adult patients with plaque psoriasis for whom phototherapy or systemic therapy is appropriate. Otezla can help you get clearer skin after just 4 months.
Okay, ready for the next game. Talking to my doctor about a pill was a total game changer.
Don't use Otezla if you're allergic to it. Get medical help right away if you have trouble breathing or swallowing, swelling of the face, lips, tongue, throat, or arms. Severe diarrhea, nausea or vomiting, depression, suicidal thoughts, or weight loss can happen. Tell your doctor if any of these occur and if you have a history of depression or suicidal thoughts. Live in the moment. Ask your doctor about Otezla. Call 1-844-4-OTEZLA or visit Otezla.com for prescribing info about cost, and more.
It's the Roger Stone Show on 77 WABC.
Welcome back. We're here with our special guest, Colonel Douglas McGregor. Colonel McGregor is widely known in the United States, Europe, Israel, Russia, China, and even Korea for his bold leadership in the Battle of 73 Easting, which still is the U.S. Army's largest tank battle since World War II. So he's a warrior, but he's a warrior who has dedicated himself to talking about peace and how we can achieve peace, at the same time being very realistic about the dangers of war. And we are privileged to have him with us today. Colonel McGregor, the state of America's military is something that concerns me. There are many, I guess we could call them conservatives, or those who are skeptical of government, who keep believing that somehow deep within our military there are these white hats who are going to ride to the rescue and end all of the unconstitutional weaponization of the criminal justice system, and going to ensure that our elections are honest, fair, and transparent. But my search indicates that during the Obama years, there was a systematic effort to rid the military at our upper and middle sections of those who either were just honest soldiers who had no political agenda, or those who may have thought to, say, lean right. Between that and, of course, the COVID-19 vaccination, I'm not even sure that America could fight one war, never mind two. What are your thoughts?
Well, I think you're onto something that's very important. The American military establishment reflects, to a large extent, the state of affairs in our society. We talk often behind closed doors about societal cohesion. In other words, the ability of the society to pull together in the event of an emergency, whether it's a natural disaster or you actually have to fight. Our societal cohesion today, Roger, is at an all-time low. We're a thoroughly tribalized society. No one wants to admit it. No one wants to talk about it. But we no longer talk about Americans. We talk about communities. We talk about the black community, the Latino community, various Asian communities. There is no discussion of white community. That never really comes up because people generally regard them as Americans. And the real question is, what about the rest? How many of them are Americans? And that's something that I think we have to address. We've had tens of millions of people come into this country in a very short period of time, not just the mass migration under Biden, which, of course, is catastrophic because it's also heavily involved in rising criminality in the country and human trafficking, child trafficking, and so forth. But over the last 30 or 40 years, we've had tens of millions of people coming in. We haven't been able to assimilate them. We haven't even been able, in many cases, to effectively integrate them. And this is a problem that you see in the American military. Now, since you mentioned Obama, and that's indisputably the case, but there is not only a low standard of discipline, inadequate discipline, in my judgment, for any military establishment to succeed on the battlefield, but the senior leadership is very unprofessional. It's not a new phenomenon. We made big mistakes after 1991. A famous philosopher once said, "War makes the victor stupid." Well, after 1991, we were very stupid. We essentially ignored the military. We poured money into it. We made it smaller. We bought expensive toys for it. But we ignored all the changes and adaptations that were required after 91 to make it a modern and effective military establishment. Well, now it's also politicized. And you are spot on. Anybody in the senior ranks today would not be there if they had expressed any opposition whatsoever to a whole series of very dumb ideas. The very notion that you would promote people, whether they're being promoted to senior enlisted rank or senior officer rank, on the basis of demonstrated character, competence, and intelligence is out of the window. It's whether or not you go along. So what we've cultivated in the leadership ranks is essentially a group of windsocks. They'll do whatever you tell them to do. Now, what does that mean for us inside the country? It means that we don't have a professional military establishment that's ready to go forward and defend the state and the American people here at home. It's a very mixed bag. And we're not sure exactly what would happen with the National Guard, although I would argue that in the sense of societal cohesion, we're probably stronger in the Guard at the moment than we are in the regular armed forces. So we're not prepared to fight. And this is another issue that has to be addressed. And this is why, I'm arguing against getting us involved in a major war in the Middle East or anywhere else right now, because we are at a weak point, not a strong point. The armed forces are not adequate. They're not ready. They're not organized effectively. And if we've learned nothing to this point, we should learn that the Russians have adapted brilliantly. And their adaptations are being embraced by all of the people watching them. We're far behind in that routine. We could end up looking as bad as we did in 1939 when the Germans invaded Poland, the way things are headed. Now, the good news is nobody really wants to fight with us. We're the ones poking everyone in the eye right now, which means that someone like President Trump, if he wants peace, he can make it because people don't want to fight us. And that's what we really need, because the war we need to win is the war for our country here at home. And that begins with border control. It begins with restoring the rule of law. It begins with getting all of these illegals out. And we simply tell them, look, you leave voluntarily in 90 days, register with us. When the economy improves and our society is more stable, we will contact you and you can come back. But if you don't voluntarily leave, you're going to be incarcerated and you will be forcibly deported. Your private property will be confiscated and your employers will be punished. We've got to go down that line, because the most important thing we've got to do right now is we have to be Americans. One people, one law, the Constitution, with one language, English. We've got to go down that route. If we don't go down that route, Roger, it doesn't matter what happens in the Middle East or Eastern Europe or anywhere else on the planet. We won't exist.
All right, Colonel McGregor, you're involved in a number of important endeavors to support the Republic. How can people find you?
Well, first of all, I'd urge everybody to go to ourcountryourchoice.com. I think you'll find a lot of interesting material there because we are an organization of almost 500,000 now. We want to build a movement in this country that is American. We want to be the party of the United States, of the American people, representing them and their interests. We want to divorce ourselves from the uniparty that is running the show in Washington. And we're organized not around some sort of ideological platform. We're organized around issues that most Americans can agree on. And that means defend our borders. It means restore the rule of law, end the criminality in our cities. Stop the drug trafficking and human trafficking. These things are killing us. And when we finally do close that border, if President Trump gets in there, then you're going to have a war inside our country, Roger, because the drug cartels are not going to be very happy if suddenly their profits dry up. So we're going to have to fight that out here. And those are just some of the issues. We're interested in electoral integrity, and sadly, Roger, you and I both know that nothing has changed since 2020. That's the problem. So as we move into this election, what evidence is there that we'll get a clean and fair election? Well, I think it will be clean and fair in some areas, but in a lot of areas it won't. And this is something else we've got to do. We've got to get out of this nonsensical vote online, vote early, vote absentee ballots and everything else, and get back to basics. And everybody votes. We could do it for 48 hours, but we got to have paper ballots. And if you're not an American citizen and you don't have proof of that, and you don't have proof of legal residence along with your citizenship, forget it. You can't vote in that precinct. I don't see any evidence that the Republicans on the Hill are going to fight for that. So I don't know what happens in November, but I don't have high hopes or expectations.
All right, I'm afraid we have to leave it there. Let me thank my special guest, Colonel Douglas McGregor, for joining us today on the Roger Stone Show. Colonel McGregor, thank you, and God bless you.
Oh, thank you, Roger. My best to everyone.